Brian, were you a video game guy?
Wow, that was straight to the point.
Yeah.
No, this is like, hey, how you doing, Brian? It's like, no, it's, are you a video game guy? It's like, damn, this how you got your wife? Okay.
I'm sorry. Hey, Brian, how are you? Right? Look, this is the first time we're doing this type of shit, man. We're gonna workshop this out and actually figure out what this little side quest of me on ChipChat looks like in interviewing folks. But yeah, are you a video game guy?
I am a let's see. I am a gamer, but not like a full-time gamer. I do play video games. So mostly lately it's been like MLB The Show or some form of fighting game. But I also have these app games as well. So
yeah, MLB The Show, I was very thrilled when that made its way to Xbox, because I actually bought a PlayStation just for that game, because there was no decent baseball game out there. In any of these games, do you ever use any cheat codes? Or in your life? I mean, ever use
in my life?
Yeah,
I'm aware of the cheat codes. I'm like back in the day, like back in the like I would say the 80s, especially like the days of Atari and stuff like that. You hear about these, if you do this type of maneuver, you'll get unlimited whatever.
Right.
Or you get strength 10 times more than you originally have, whatever cheat codes. I tried not to do that. Either I tried
stand-up gentleman.
Yeah, I wouldn't say stand-up gentleman. It's like either I tried it never worked. I felt, or I know about it and I don't want to bother with it because I'm like cool with wherever level I'm trying to do, and I like the challenge. So like, I mean, I mean, like, you're aware of it, but I'm a challenge guy. I like to, I'll go through the trials and tribulations and the frustrations and breaking everything and, to get to where I'm going. But all in all, in the end, it's just like, this is what life is all about. And life shouldn't be easy. Life does not have a cheat code.
Well, see, I almost would, and right, there's a lot of famous cheat code. I think of the Konami cheat code. I don't know that off the top of my head anymore. I think it's like up, down, like combinations of left and right, some start selects, all that type of stuff. The one I always really enjoyed was Sonic 2. There was one you could do one in the sound stage that let you get all the levels that you could go to. I think
I remember that one. Yeah.
Supersonic, I think, after as well too. If you get without getting all the emeralds, you just have to get the rings. But you just said it's not like, you talk about life, right? I think life is a game, and right, sometimes you might want a few cheat codes. Today we got to kick it with Dr. Daryl Fairweather, who is the chief economist at Redfin, but also she's the author of the new book, Hate the Game: Economic Cheat Codes for Life, Love, and Work. And I the economy touches all of our lives. And I found that economists have a unique view on some of the challenges we all face. And I think as you guys listen today to Dr. Fairweather, she didn't disappoint. This book is really dope. I really enjoyed Hate the Game. I've shared it with a bunch of folks. And I also hope, I don't know what we're calling this again, but whatever we're going to end up calling this, I hope you all enjoy the conversation that I had with Dr. Fairweather. And I think without further ado, we'll go ahead and we'll jump right into that.
Yeah. Well, before we jump into it, was it Redfin or Rentfin?
Not Redfin, like the Redfin. I don't think I said Redfin.
It's not Rentfin?
It's not Redfin. No, it is. Oh, now this would be the revelation of the. It's Redfin. You got me tripping, bro. What? And you know what? Let's go. You got me thinking forever it was called Rentfin, which wouldn't make sense. I'm not going to say that that's not that far off, but no, it is a Redfin. You know what? Let's just get to the interview.
Let's go to the interview.
Let's go to the interview. This is on smart. All right. Dr. Daryl Fairweather, we are really excited to talk to you about Hate the Game. So thank you for joining us today. This is a little deviation of what we usually do. I usually host the show with my good buddy Chip, but I really wanted to talk to you, and I've always one of my goals in life was to talk to my favorite authors. So I'm really excited about this. So thank you for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
No, awesome. I guess to just kick it off, like, what influenced you to write this book?
Well, I, as you know from the book, went on to get my PhD in economics. I'm an economist, but I always felt like the way that economics was taught was not really for me. Like it almost felt like I was listening in on a conversation between two other people, but like I wasn't really supposed to be there. They weren't really talking to me. So with this book, I really wanted to write something that would resonate with people that normally don't see themselves in the world of economics. I use a lot of references to Black popular culture. I talk about examples from my own life, and I hope that that opens up the world of economics to more people.
No, I felt that thoroughly throughout the book. I mean, even in becoming an economist, like there was some like apprehension where I read in it, like your father had some apprehension of that. Could you jump into a little bit about that?
Yeah, so I went to MIT for undergrad, and MIT is known for science and engineering. And my dad was super excited for me to get into that school. And I was originally supposed to study engineering, but he gave me the book Freakonomics by the economist Stephen Levitt right before I went off to MIT. I read it on the plane right there. And after reading it, I was like, oh, this is actually what I want to do. Like, I've always been interested in people, but also I like math and science. And it felt like economics, especially the way that economics is presented in that book and taught at MIT, fit perfectly with my interests. So I talked to my dad. He calls me up on the phone and he wants to know how things are going at MIT. And I tell him, like, great news, I'm majoring in economics. And immediately he pushed back. He was like, wait a second, like, I sent you here to study engineering. Engineering is like what MIT is known for. And I tried to explain to him, like, no, MIT is actually really good at economics as well. It's tied #1. This author that you introduced me to went to MIT. He got his graduate degree there. So I was like, this is what's so bad about that. But he really felt like engineering was a safer choice because he himself is a lawyer, he's a prosecutor, and he has to deal with biased judges and juries all the time. He knows that once you introduce people into something that's more subjective, that's when you can really be at a disadvantage as a person of color or as a woman in my case. So he wanted me to go into engineering because he thought that that would be the safer bet. And also my grandmother, she was the first Black woman to be a licensed architect in the state of New York. And then she did it again in the state of California. She was the first Black woman inducted into the American Institute of Architects. So she had this career in this engineering type field. I think architecture is engineering still. And she was always like really pushing me into the sciences. So she called me up too, but her reasoning was a little bit different. Like she said all the same things my dad said, but she was also like, you should study engineering because engineers make better husbands, which was kind of weird. But backstory on her is that she's been married 5 times. So I think she knew what she was talking about. But I stuck to my guns. I wanted to study economics. It was like, it really felt like it was something for me. And I felt like the hardest part about getting through college is just finding something that you're passionate about. And I had found my thing. So I didn't care about the disadvantages that I might face.
Yeah, I found that so powerful, right? Like I have a daughter, and then like even making sure to be conscious. I mean, she's only 6 now, but years from now, whatever field she wants to choose, and to like not like try to stifle that because you're almost trying to protect, because you know what after you know what the world is at this point. You know how cruel it can be. So I just found that part of the book like really interesting and really inspiring, like for myself. Going back kind of to the book, can you break down what game theory is? Because I think it's essential to kind of understand as you like progress through the book.
Game theory is basically the building blocks of economics. Like economics, it ranges from everything from the entire economy down to just like 2 people negotiating over a transaction. And a negotiation is a type of game that we model with game theory. So if you want to understand why, say, home prices are the way that they are, going down to the game theory level of a buyer negotiating with a seller and how do they come up with that price is like how these prices end up getting set throughout the entire economy. And it's not just about negotiations. There are games about ultimatums, games about how to get promoted, how to get a raise, these games that bosses and employees play with one another. So I go through a lot of these different games in the book to show you like here are the places that they will show up in your career.
No, I it was kind of eye-opening to me because there was a show, I guess it was Max HBO, where they're calling themselves Bomani Jones, called Game
Oh yeah,
Theory.
yeah.
And I know his background, like in it, but I never really understood this concept until reading this book. So I will never forget that now. And there's a lot of things that I've learned in this book that I've applied even recently to my career. And I hope everybody goes out again and purchases Hate the Game, because you could learn a lot from this. You mentioned earlier, like there's a lot of like pop culture references, and like I found that to be very relatable. What can, I guess, Morris Chestnut and Vivica A. Fox tell us about the Nash equilibrium, as you talk about that in the book from their movie?
Yes. So
Future Telegram.
I like to say that my first introduction to game theory was the movie Two Can Play That Game with Vivica A. Fox and Morris Chestnut that came out in 2001. It's the plot of the movie is that Vivica A. Fox and Morris Chestnut, they're dating, but Morris Chestnut, he starts acting a fool, like stepping out on Vivica A. Fox, flirting with other women, and she needs to figure out what to do. Like, how can she get the relationship back that she had before that was so great? Now she's stuck with this relationship that is inferior to the one that she had before. And she talks about like how her girlfriends would handle something like that. Like they would fight with their boyfriends, they would destroy their stuff, they'd cuss them out. But she was smarter than that. She knew that in order to get a better deal within the relationship, which I call in game theory terms the inside option, she needs to improve her outside options. So she goes out and she starts flirting with other women, just like Morris Chestnut was, and flaunting these men in front of him so that he knows that she has a real chance of leaving him for someone better. That way he will work harder to keep her. And that seems to work. I mean, they learn in the end that they probably shouldn't play these games, which I talk about later in the book, how like you really should try to work with your partner instead of thinking about things as transactional. But for all negotiations, that principle holds, which is that you can be in a bad relationship and it still be in equilibrium. And Nash equilibrium means that neither person has a reason to defect, to do something else. But that doesn't mean that you don't have a chance at improving the relationship. What you need to do is create a real threat that equilibrium will be disrupted by creating a better outside option for yourself. And that will encourage whoever you're negotiating against to give you better terms in the inside option of the relationship.
Yeah, I'm also glad that there was a glossary at the end of this book as well too, because go back to some of these terms. You also, there's another term, I guess, is comparative advantage,
Mm-hmm.
right? Can you and I think you kind of explain this with your internship at Morgan Stanley, if I remember. Can you take us through that?
Yes. So a comparative advantage means that a person, or it even could be a country, but I'll go with person, they have a lower opportunity cost for engaging in an activity. And that might mean that they're really good at the thing that they're doing. Say this internship in Morgan Stanley, I was doing a lot of spreadsheets. Like if I was the best at doing spreadsheets, that would give me an advantage, but it wouldn't really be a comparative advantage unless I was so much better at doing spreadsheets than I was at all the other things I could be doing in my life, like going back to grad school or getting another job or, laying about the house and just having fun. And the thing to understand is that the people who are going to be best suited for a job that the employer is going to like the most are the people who have these comparative advantages. And sometimes it comes from being the best at your job, but sometimes it means being the most willing to work hard at that job because you don't have any other options except to work hard. And that was a lesson I needed to learn in this internship, that there were just people around me who wanted it way more than I did. Like they were willing to work way longer hours, being at the office at 7 a.m. and not leave till, after like 8 o'clock at night, like literally spending more than 12 hours a day at the office was what these people were willing to do in order to get into this investment banking world. And, maybe I would have been smarter than them in like a school setting or excelled in just the task of the job if you're just comparing it based on absolute advantage. But the fact that they were willing to work harder than me kind of meant that like they were better suited to it, and I should probably go find out what my comparative advantage is out in the world.
Right, because I think you make it clear it doesn't have to be that way. There are options, right? And I guess like depending on what individuals' values are, and I know work can be kind of a tricky thing because a lot of folks find like identity in work. Where I'm like, work is cool, I want to use work to go do other fun things outside. But yeah, I found that very interesting as well, that you could it doesn't have to be this like rat race and always trying, or it can be for some folks, but you don't have to choose that.
Yeah, one thing I talk about a lot in the book is just that, I think people get really caught up in whatever game they're playing. Like if you're at one corporation and you see everybody going for the same promotions, it can feel like that's the only goal. But once you step outside of that and realize like I could go work another job, or I could go back to school, or I could, get some other skill, then it feels like the prize maybe isn't as valuable as it might have seemed at first.
Another thing that you talk a lot about in the book is the game of chess, which I really enjoyed. My mom is still beating me to this day at chess. I'm really not good at it, but I do enjoy the game. And can you discuss kind of how it can be applied, I guess, in various areas of life? And I'm thinking a lot about like that skill versus luck, and then maybe even like the starting position.
Yeah, so one metaphor for chess that I talk about is how even though chess is like the pinnacle of a game of skill. Like this is the game that smart people face off against to figure out who's the smartest. There still is this baked in disadvantage where if you are the black player, it means that you automatically go second. If you're the white player, you automatically go first. So in any game, one player is just going to start out with this slight edge. But the edge, it matters somewhat in evenly matched games. Like you can see that there is this statistical advantage to going first. But if you are in a game where you are just a better player, like you have more skill, you have more practice, it's easy to overcome that advantage because it only takes the other player messing up one time, like basically throwing away a turn for the person who went second to kind of get the upper hand and start pulling ahead. And I think this is similar to a lot of games we play in life, like me choosing to be an economist. I probably did start out at an inherent disadvantage because I'm like one of the very few Black women in this field, but it doesn't mean that I can't succeed. It just means that I need to like really focus on the skill aspect to get ahead. And then another thing that chess is really great at illustrating is this concept of beginning game versus end game. Because in game theory, you want to use backwards induction, which means thinking about the end game as you're making those beginner moves, like thinking about what is the position that I'm trying to get myself into that will result in a checkmate and kind of working backwards from those steps to get there. This is what you should do in basically any game is think about the final place you want to be and kind of work your way backwards. Like, okay, if I need to get promoted, then that means I need to get my manager to put me up for promotion. And if I need to get my manager to put me up for promotion, I need to be a top performer on my team. And like working backwards to all the steps that you need to take to get that final goal will create that path.
You also use Big Brother season 23 to talk about this. Can you if our listeners didn't watch that season, what was unique about that season and what was the end result?
Okay, so Big Brother is this reality competition where all the players get into this house and they're basically competing to be the last player standing. Kind of like Survivor, but without all of the like deprivation. You get to eat, you're not on a beach or anything or camping, you're just in the house. So it's just about the strategy. And for the longest time, they didn't have any Black winners of Big Brother, even though statistically they probably should have. I think there was only like a 6% chance of there being no Black winner before this season, given how many Black winners had participated. So the odds are that there was some inherent disadvantage to being a Black player in this game. And what changed, I think it was in 2021, post the George Floyd riots, is that all these TV companies, they got really conscious about race. And they, in one season, casted 6 members of the group that identified as Black. And historically in this game, usually the Black players were the first to be voted out because they would have to join an alliance that was majority white. And then they would be at the bottom of that totem pole, where once the alliance had a turn on themselves, they would immediately go for the Black player who wasn't as socially integrated as the white players. But when the Black players had enough people to form a really strong alliance, a 6-person alliance, every single Black person made it to the end. So 6 out of the 6 final contestants were Black. And it's because I think they knew that they had to stick together. They were never going to turn on that alliance because the outside option of aligning with one of the other players, they knew that that would just result in them getting kicked out even earlier. And it was the first season that there was a Black winner because obviously if all 6 make it to the final, then one of them is going to be the final winner.
Yeah, it was just eye-opening again to be like, oh, if you add more folks into the game, right, that the likelihood of them working together and getting it to the end, like it just makes perfect sense. this might tie into this a little bit, but can you share to our listeners, like when you're at the University of Chicago, there was this study group you had, right? And just kind of how the new study partner, right, for lack of a better word, almost kind of fucked the group up because he was so damn thirsty for Emma. Can you talk a little bit about that? Because I thought it was a very interesting, like the point you made from that was very interesting.
Yes. So I get to University of Chicago as a first year PhD student. I'm thinking like this is going to be something that where I prove my skills, like chess, for example. But
Right.
part of it ended up being more like Big Brother because immediately they told us we had to pair off into study groups. And it wasn't really optional. Like if you weren't going to be able to do the homeworks if you didn't have a 5-person study group. But what happened, I noticed, is that one of the people that I thought I was going to be in a study group with, he formed a study group with the other white American men in our class. And I did the math, and there was only a 1% chance that all the white American men would have teamed up in this way if their decision about who to team up with had nothing to do with being white American or a man. Like it was very suspicious.
I love it. Like I did the math on this because
yeah,
like, the math is
yeah, because sometimes it's like, you know, these things happen to you, you experience bias in the world, but everyone's like, oh, it was just a coincidence. Well,
Right.
The chance of it being a coincidence was less than 1%. So I did find a study group. I ended up teaming up with two other women and a man. We were only a group of 4 at first, so we were already at this disadvantage because every other study group was 5 people, and we were the 4 stragglers. And then the first night, the guy, he invites me over to his apartment for like a team bonding event. I get there early, and because I really wanted to play Guitar Hero, I was really into drumming, so I wanted to just get on that drumming kit. And as I'm drumming along, I even remember the song. It was Seven Nation Army. He's starting to like throw back drinks, and I don't notice this until I'm done. And I turn around and I'm like, he's already drunk, and he starts moaning about how in love he is with one of our study group members, Emma. And I'm like, oh my god, like this is the worst thing ever. Like he's gonna tell her that he loves her. She's already engaged, so he has no chance.
Right.
This is not gonna work, and it's just gonna break up the study group when we're already at this disadvantage. But I talked some sense into him. To his credit, he took my advice and he took his sights off of Emma and just focused on the actual academics. So like by a hair, we managed to get through this. And I researched like why it's happening, and the research does show that when there are fewer women in a graduate program, they have a lower chance of graduating. And I think these kinds of dynamics explain how that could happen. There's also research that shows that in graduate programs, women experience more unrequited advances than men do, and it puts them in an awkward and like uncomfortable situation. So yeah, this is somewhat predictable based on the research, but I feel like it still isn't acknowledged the way that women can be immediately put at a disadvantage when they're in the minority compared to men.
Right. And I think we're thinking of this, like there's obviously a like ick factor of like just men doing that, but even like if you're not able to kind of graduate or progress, I feel like that hurts the economy overall, right?
Mhm.
Because we're not getting the best and the brightest out there, and it's for no like good reason. So I found the story.
Definitely.
Yeah, the story was like in a sense like very like predictable, but the numbers you kind of put behind it is kind of like, oh no, this is a real world. This ends up has real world impacts, I guess. So.
Yeah, especially with the whole conversation about DEI right now, I feel like people have really lost the plot on why these programs need to exist, like why it is that women and minorities are underrepresented in the first place, and how hard it is to be just being in the minority is a hard position to be in, regardless of what puts you in that minority.
Right, totally agree. All right, kids. Before Beyonce was like this solo icon, she was part of a group, right? This group is called Destiny's Child, right? And there were 4 members of this. And you use Destiny's Child and the breakup, I guess, to talk about a few things that I found interesting, like ultimatums and kind of how they can backfire. But specifically, I guess they can backfire when you don't have the right amount of information. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, so in behavioral economics and game theory, there's this thing called the ultimatum game. And an ultimatum just basically is a take it or leave it offer. Like if I have $100, and I have an option to give you some, I can say like, no, I'm going to keep all the $100, or I could give you like some amount, like I'm going to give you $1, I'm going to give you $20. And ultimatums came up with Destiny's Child. I'll just tell the story. So back in the early 2000s, Destiny's Child was breaking out as a group. They had a couple of hits from their first album, but they weren't like really on a level where they were cemented in the industry. They were still trying to prove themselves. And two of the members, Latoya and Latavia, felt like they weren't getting a good experience in the group. That Matthew Knowles, the manager, who is Beyonce's dad, was giving preferential treatment to Beyonce. So they went to the rest of the group members and said, gave them an ultimatum, like it's either us or it's the manager, take it or leave it. And I think they thought that them breaking up the group would leave the group with zero, like an ultimatum, like we either are going to be together or you get left with nothing. But I think what they misunderstood was that the group would still survive without them. That Beyonce really was a strong enough performer and the leader where it didn't really matter who was singing behind her. She was on the path to being a superstar. And there's this book called Rockonomics by Alan Kruger that talks about this, how a small minority of artists get the lion's share of revenue, of attention, of streams, because it's based on popularity. And with popularity, that means that somebody needs to recommend you to somebody else. And once that chain starts going, you get exponential growth in terms of how many people are following you. But if you don't have that initial momentum, you're going to be like left in the dust, way far behind. So the fact that Beyonce was already at this early stage breaking out meant that like she was going to end up far exceeding the popularity of the other group members. And I think Matthew Knowles knew this. He knew about Diana, how, the Supremes turned into just Diana Ross and how the Jacksons turned into just Michael Jackson. And I think that that was his plan all along. But he probably somewhat hid it from the other group members and, hid that information, which is why they didn't understand that it wasn't about the group. It really was a vehicle for Beyonce to become Beyonce.
I guess maybe it's not a great answer to this, but how do you extract that information out? Like if you're in these type of situations, is there a way to do that, or is it somewhat of luck or?
No, I think you just have to pay attention and take and pay attention to what people care about. Because I ran into the same problem when I went to go try and negotiate my salary with my first boss. That I thought, like, of course, what he cares about is the project that I'm working on and pleasing the client, and the client's going to be really worried if the lead economist, me, quits halfway through the project. So I thought I had him in a tough position, but what I didn't realize was that what he really cared about was being in control of the company, being in control of his employees, and having employees who wouldn't question things, who wouldn't raise their hand and ask for more. And I think if you pay attention to what people say, the way that they behave, the things that they prioritize, you can get this information. Like, I mean, if they noticed that Matthew Knowles was giving Beyonce preferential treatment, that probably should have been enough to tell them like where this was going, what Matthew Knowles and Beyonce really were aiming for. But I think that they maybe were just biased in a sense, like seeing things through their own worldview instead of taking on the worldview of the person that they're negotiating with.
And even then, right, they would have to make a choice, right? Is the inside option better than the outside option, right? So it doesn't even necessarily end there, because I guess it just depends on what they would really want for their career.
Yeah, they could have done what Kelly did and like stay on for a couple more years and try to make connections and get on like other people's songs and still try to make a career for themselves, knowing that the group or what Matthew Knowles was really promoting was Beyonce. But I think that was a choice they had to make. Like, are they going to be better off solo or staying in the group as is? There really wasn't this option that they were going for where Beyonce fires her dad at this moment. Right. Like Beyonce was not ready to do that.
It's interesting you bring up Kelly, because now I want to bring up obviously the famous video in you being an economist, right? Why was she sending a message in Excel in her and Nelly? Like it's always very weird about that. If you haven't seen the video, her song, I'm blanking on the name, with Nelly.
Dilemma.
They're literally sending messages on.
Maybe she was an analyst at Morgan Stanley. She was sending she was sending the latest spreadsheet.
Please go watch that video if you've not seen that. It's for us millennials who find it very, very funny. You have this chapter, Dreams of Dream Jobs, which I mean, Chef's Kiss. That's just a really great chapter. And I don't think we can cover everything, because one, you should kind of go buy the book, right, and read it yourself. But I would like to explore a few parts of this. And I think it's around like selecting, I think you mentioned like the optimal employer, and then around creating resumes, and then like finally like playing that interview game.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so the first choice when you're trying to apply for a job is deciding like how many jobs am I going to apply to, which jobs am I really going to focus on. And when you're early in your career, you don't really have anything to distinguish yourself, to differentiate yourself, as they say in economics. Like you look identical to the next person who's applying for a job. So I think in that scenario, you really just want to cast a wide net and send out as many resumes as possible and hope that yours is one of the ones that is kind of randomly picked from the pile. But once you're a little further along in your career and you have skills that can match certain jobs, I encourage people to use more of a predator mindset, like a bird of prey, like a hawk. Like a hawk doesn't go and like eat everything. They hone in on, one tasty animal and they pursue it and they try to get it. And that's what I think you should do once you're a little further along in your career. But that means like really creating a strategy for that one job that you really want, or like maybe 3 jobs if you want to broaden it a bit, and make sure that your resume perfectly matches what this job is going for. Because oftentimes at a higher level, they're really just trying to find the person whose skills best match the job. So that might involve like going and looking at the job description, seeing what words they use, and you putting those exact words into your resume. Like if they value somebody who is a team player, talk about all the times that you did teamwork on your resume, versus if they value somebody who's an independent thinker, highlight those experiences on your resume. I think having a different resume for each job you're applying to really makes sense when you're trying to get those specialized jobs. And then once you have your stuff you want to put on your resume, I think you should also arrange it in a way that like makes it shine, because that's part of the game too. You can create like a bit of an optical illusion by putting some of the experience that is most resonant with the job up at the top. Like you don't necessarily need to stick to that chronological order. You can use bold text, or you can just in ways highlight the things that you most want that job recruiter to see.
Another area that it really resonated with me is the naming that you use, and your name specifically. And I think for me, right, like folks don't know, I go by Cortez, but my mother named me Nicholas Warmington, right? Which I was always very frustrated with that name, because like here in DC, a lot of kids had a lot of jokes a lot of times, right? And the big one was always that your name sounds white, right? And I always like, all right, whatever. I feel like there's black Nicholases out there, but whatever. But I think you talk a lot about kind of your name and like when you use your middle name, and then just in general, your name is, you can't really figure out who you might be talking to with Daryl Fairweather. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, so I was born in 1988, the late 80s, when there were really 2 famous Daryls. There was Daryl Strawberry, the baseball player who had a bit of a notorious history, a black man.
Yes.
And there's Daryl Hannah, this white actress. She was in the movie Splash with Tom Hanks. She was in Kill Bill 2, the Volume 2 one, for people who are a bit younger, but she was really big in the 80s. And so even whenever I meet another Daryl, it's always either a black man or a white woman or a non-black woman. So when people hear my name, Daryl Fairweather, I know they either are assuming that I am a black man or I am probably a white woman. I even checked this on this website that like tells you what race or gender people probably are based on their names. And when I put Rose in my name, that's like a cue that I'm a woman. But because most women with the name Daryl are not black, it also is a cue that I'm not black. And in real life, I'm biracial. I'm both black and white. But it's always like this dilemma whenever I'm introducing myself online or in a resume or just in print, like which Daryl are people visualizing when they see that Daryl? Should I hint that I'm a woman with the rose, or should I keep it off and let people think that I might be a man? And there's economics research on resumes that has broken this down, like which resume names are most likely to get a call back. And unfortunately, black names are less likely to get picked in a group of resumes compared to white names. And even though there's like a small difference between men and women, white women are more likely to get called back for an interview than a black man. So I put Daryl Rose Fairweather on my resume because I'm just trying to get picked. I know once they meet me, they're going to find out like what I look like.
And now's the time to actually, but I need to get in the door, right?
Yes.
What can I do to get inside the door?
Right, because people's, I think, stereotypes are stronger before they meet you. Like, I can defy stereotypes once I'm talking to you. I can show you how competent I am. But if you're just seeing the resume and you're forming these stereotypes, then that gives me a little bit less of a shot. And I know lots of people, like I have lots of friends who do this, like who use initials for their name if they have an ethnic or feminine sounding name because they don't want this discrimination. The reason my mom named me Daryl was because she was a freelance journalist with a feminine name and she felt like she was not getting jobs because of the feminine name. But yeah, I don't think she really had like the racial awareness to get the Daryl part of it. But yeah, that's a whole different story.
No, I that part of the book really resonated with me because I've always found it interesting in like previous jobs or like you talk to folks on the phone and then they meet you and they're like, you're
Mhm.
and like, yeah, that's me. Okay,
Mhm.
moving along. My favorite chapter, was this workplace conflict.
Mhm.
And I can you tell our listeners about Jake and Jared, who like, I mean, they're truly like two dick weasels, to be honest. And really, I guess specifically that situation and what people need to consider when they're taking on like work bullies or workplace conflict in general.
Yeah, so I'll tell the abbreviated version. So
Okay.
I was working at this big tech company and I was starting to like really make a name for myself and do a good job. And I got this really big project from our senior vice president to look into why employees in some of our satellite offices in India were saying that they didn't like mandatory overtime. One of them told the senior vice president on a visit that this was a terrible policy. So he came to me, and it was my job to analyze employee satisfaction and its relationship to performance. So this was like a natural project to me. I went and got the data from the scheduling team, and I analyzed it, and the results were very clear. Although the satisfaction scores were slightly higher for the people on mandatory overtime, what was really happening is they were quitting earlier. And everybody loves their job like the first month in, and they
Right.
tend to like get less satisfied the more the time goes on. So it was actually the fact that they were quitting earlier that was hiding that. But once I controlled for how long they had been in the job, it was super obvious that they were less satisfied. So I send this on to my boss and my manager's manager and the scheduling team manager. And I thought like, oh, this is just a slam dunk. Like I'm done here. But then I get asked to meet with these two people on the scheduling team. They have some questions for me. And at first I went in like, okay, I can answer these questions. I explained the economics of what was going on. I drew charts. I had all my tables ready, but they were still being really dense about it, like still pushing me on it. And once they found out that I had only analyzed data from one of the locations in India, they were like, oh, that's not good enough. You need to go get data from all these locations. I'm like, okay. So I went back to their analyst on their team, got the data, analyzed it again, got the exact same result, sent it out again, and still they wanted to meet with me again. And I was like, I don't understand why I'm having this meeting over and over again. Like we went through everything before. I did what they asked me. I talked to my director about this, who was the youngest woman to be promoted to that position at the company. And immediately she was like, oh, they don't respect you because you're a woman. I don't know
Wow.
what was going on with her at that
Wow.
point. Like maybe
Just
she had just
blatant
experienced
honesty.
something.
Right.
Yeah, but she was like, yeah, this is what's happening. You need to stand up for yourself. She wasn't trying to solve the problem for me, but she was telling me like, you need to go and make sure that they know not to mess with you. So I took another meeting with them. They go into the same line of questioning all over again. And I'm starting to get like frustrated at this point that they keep harassing me,
Right.
even though I did everything they asked me. So they kind of let it slip at one point when they said that, like, do you realize how much work this is going to create if we have to eliminate mandatory overtime? And I was like, and that's when I realized, oh, this is about like you not wanting the extra work, that this is going to create more work for you to redo all the schedules if the vice president decides to eliminate mandatory overtime. So that's when I got pissed, and it kept pressing me like, you need to be absolutely sure. And I was like, well, I'm 99% sure because I know that there's only a 1% chance that my results are statistically false, and that really pissed them off more. And they said, and then they honed in on like, oh, I only had 3 months of data. They're like, you need data for the entire year.
Right.
And I just kept pressing back, like, why? Because in economics, you don't want to over test, it's called, because if you keep looking for a different answer, eventually you'll find it, even if it's the wrong answer. So I was digging in, and then the other guy, Jared, he like exploded on me. He was like, "You don't know that," and he's like banging his fist on the table. And the other guy, I think he was like more the good cop. He looked terrified, like, "Oh my god, he blew my cover."
What are we doing here?
Yeah. And I just waited. I was like, okay, like I'm just gonna wait for you to apologize. No apology came. So I just told them, like, look, I'm gonna get one more set of data from your analyst, and then I'm gonna send the results directly to the vice president, and you can talk to him about it if you don't like the results. So I got the new data, results came back exactly the same. I sent it directly to the vice president, who eliminated the mandatory overtime. So they ended up having to do all the schedules over again. Haha.
Right. Exactly. I also you shared this quote about a dog and the picture of the dog.
Oh yeah,
Yes.
sorry. Yeah, so he was asking me to go get more data, which was really frustrating to me because it was like it's like when I was looking at the table of results, I could clearly see the results. It was so obvious. Like anybody
Right.
who knew how to read these results would see that this was irrefutable. But he wanted me to get more data, and I was trying to explain it to him like why I don't need more data. And I said, it's like I'm looking at a picture of a dog. Like I can see its ears, I can see its fur, I can see its floppy tongue, but you're saying my picture isn't good enough. I need to go get an HD photo. I need more pixels. But I don't need more pixels to know I'm looking at a dog. Like just because I go get a higher res photo, the dog isn't going to suddenly disappear. I don't need to like zoom in on the drool dripping off of his tongue
Right.
to know that I'm looking at a dog. And that's what really set him off when he like banged his fist and started yelling at me.
It's a really good point. I mean, it's a dog, right? It's a dog.
Yeah, I think he got mad that I got him. He
Yeah.
didn't have an answer for it.
Right. But another part of this that was really like not eye-opening because I've seen this in the workplace, but some of the stats you put out there, I guess, when women express anger in the workplace versus men. Can you break that down a little bit?
Yeah, so there's research that's been published in economics journals. There was one study that looked at financial advisors who were being punished for, or being like reprimanded for doing something wrong. And when you compare men and women who did the exact same bad behavior, like maybe they were investing in stocks they shouldn't have been, or didn't tell their clients something they shouldn't have, the women ended up getting much harsher punishments than the men for the same thing. And the explanation was that like, well, men just made mistakes, but like women, there's something like inherently bad about them when they do something wrong. And the same thing is true for aggressive behaviors. When women act like aggressive in a workplace, they are stereotyped as just being angry women. But when men do it, they're like, oh, something was going on with them. There was a bad day, or there was something wrong with the person that they were talking to. Like it's explained away more. So as a woman, you have to be really careful and not like show that outward aggression, or be really careful about when you show it, because you will get punished more for it.
Yeah, I just the number again. I think one thing that your book does really well is like taking things that people are feeling or that you probably might be observing, but actually putting the data behind it, which I really respect. Just because sometimes you're wondering like, is this actually happening, as you mentioned earlier? But yeah, the numbers are out there, and it's clearly that it's happening. It's clear that it's happening. Another thing you talk about is kind of like why we shouldn't really beat ourselves up like if we're not saving as much, right? And I think I guess what you were talking about in this section of the book was kind of, I guess, tolerance risk. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, so risk or tolerance for risk basically describes like how willing you are to make a bet. Like some people are always making bets on just about everything, and they're really seeking out that risk. But most people have a bit of a distaste for risk, that if you offer them a 50-50 bet, and they would rather just keep the money than engage in the bet because they don't want to risk losing it. And this can come up in investing, where maybe you don't want to put your money in the stock market because you have like just an aversion to that risk, or maybe you don't want to like apply for that new job because the job that you're in is more safe. So it's good to like at least be conscious of your tolerance for risk. And you can also like do things to reduce your risk. So diversifying is one way, like not putting all your eggs in one basket. You can do this with your investments if you invest in a bunch of different stocks instead of just one. You can also do this with your income streams, like having a side hustle is just a way to make sure that even if you lose one job, you still have an income source in another job. And one thing I talk about with saving too is that some people are spending all the money that's coming in, and it's not because they're like immoral that they don't have discipline to save. It's because perhaps they're focusing on earning more money so they can get to a point where they can save. When you're living constantly on the edge, you can have this scarcity it's harder, it's like literally harder to make decisions. There's a book called
Right.
Scarcity by Senthil Mullainathan about how people, just by virtue of having less money, it makes it harder for them to make decisions about money because they're just so stressed out. So I think if you are in that position where you're simply too stressed to save, then it makes sense to just focus on, okay, how can I get myself to a place where I'm earning enough money that at least I have a little bit of breathing room.
No, again, there, because right, if I'm living paycheck to paycheck right now, I need to pay the things that are in front of me. And like I've found that even in my career as I've advanced, it's like, oh, I see when you start making a little bit more, it's definitely like easier to set some of it aside, right? When you're able to pay for everything that you need. But I thought that was huge, because I think sometimes you hear folks are always like, you need to save, but are you really in the actual position to save? I think is what you have to describe.
Yeah, absolutely.
The one thing I did miss that I want to kind of go back to is you talk a lot about meritocracy, right? And I almost like why that's a myth. And I guess specifically around, like, I think you were talking through like advocating for a promotion. It's like it might not be the person who's doing the most, like the hardest work, that actually gets the promotion. And they were like, you gave some like ways to actually achieve promotion. Can you talk about that?
Yeah, so getting promoted, there's this problem in economics called the principal agent problem.
Yes.
Where a boss wants you to do certain things. They want you to work as hard as you possibly can in the hours that you're at work. They don't want you, like, taking bathroom breaks or looking
sharing
at your phone
memes,
or whatever.
Yeah,
sharing memes. But as a worker, you really want to like make as much money as you can without, killing yourself at the job.
Right.
Yeah, you'll put in effort, but you need a little bit of time for yourself. So there's this natural tension between what a boss wants and what a worker wants. And bosses can do certain things to encourage workers to work harder. They can tell them that they are going to measure their performance. I give the example of, again, going back to spreadsheets, putting data in a spreadsheet. They might say, I'm going to pay you based on how many spreadsheets you complete. But even then, it's not perfect because like the boss doesn't really know how hard the job is. Maybe there was a bunch of copy pasted information that makes it super easy to do it really fast. And then the worker can just slack off once they finish it really fast and not tell the boss how long it took them. Or maybe it's really hard. Maybe there are a bunch of typos and it's taking them extra longer than the boss anticipated because the work is just more complicated than it really is. So even if you try to pay on performance, it doesn't exactly work out. And so that makes it really hard to determine like who is most qualified for a higher pay or who is most qualified for a promotion. The boss can only observe so much. And if they start focusing on one thing, like, I want you to finish this as quickly as possible, the worker's probably not going to focus on quality. But if the boss tells them, I want this done perfectly, then the worker is going to not focus on doing things quickly. They're going to focus on doing it exactly right. So who ends up getting promoted can be subjective because the criteria, like the boss might not like be stating the proper criteria to get promoted. And also a lot of the times there is a game involved. Like when I got promoted, I did the backwards induction thing where I was trying to figure out like, what are all the steps to me getting promoted? And I figured out that the way you get promoted, at least at this company, was my manager would have to put me up for promotion. My name, along with the names of all the other managers in the organization, would go to the directors. The directors would winnow down the list. So even if I was put up for promotion by my manager, I wouldn't necessarily be on the list. And then the list would finally go to the vice president, who would make a final call. So based on that, I was like, okay, what I really need to do is I need to make sure the vice president likes me and is impressed by me, but I also need to make sure the directors see that the vice president is impressed by me so that they'll know that if my name isn't on the list, that the vice president will be suspicious of them, because the vice president of this company was like super suspicious of everything the directors did, thinking that they were like, I mean, they had the same principal agent model. The vice president wanted the directors to do their job, but he was worried that they weren't really doing their job. So I needed to like get to this place where the directors knew that the vice president liked me. And that's what I did by volunteering to speak in meetings where they would all be present and getting like compliments from the vice president in front of the directors. And that did actually end up working. That's how I ended up getting the job, was by using that strategy.
Yeah. Like it's weird because it feels like in reading this book, was able to kind of do some of these things in my career, but not really understand. Like, again, you put a lot of like words behind things like, oh, all right, well, I kind of know if I want to go any higher. Like, there's a few people who make these decisions. How do I get in front of them to make sure that they're singing my praises, because like usually and everybody else will fall in line because like, well, the boss kind of likes that.
Yeah.
I kind of look crazy deviating from that.
Exactly. But I think a lot of people that just focus on their manager and they wonder why their manager maybe didn't stick their neck out for them. And it's because your manager has different priorities. Like sometimes you got to go above them to make sure that your manager's priorities are aligned with your own.
Okay, I'm gonna throw a few fun questions before we kind of close out here. Do you have a favorite video game?
I really like this game called Tropico, which is like
Okay.
an old video game, but they still are putting out different editions. You get to play the dictator of an island. It's like kind of like Cuba, and it's
Oh my God, Chip, my other if he heard this, he would lose his mind.
Is that his favorite game too?
Well, he's always talking about being this benevolent dictator, which I find to be crazy.
Yeah, no, it's great. Yeah, I love
but,
that game because because that's you're like role playing as this dictator who's just trying to hold on to power, but you have to keep the economy going. You do have to like invest in businesses and make sure there's enough food for people, or else the people on the island will start protesting you and take you out of power. But it's fun. It has a great soundtrack too. It has all this Cuban and Caribbean music in it.
I'm going to find this this game.
Tropico, yeah.
Tropico. I'm definitely looking for that. Sounds really awesome. Obviously we're talking about your book. Are you reading anything dope currently? And I guess a follow-up question to that is, what's been like the most impactful book you've read? I think I have an idea. I think you might have already said it, but
oh yeah, well, Freakonomics was definitely the book that like got me into economics, that I didn't exactly model my book after, but I did read it a whole bunch of times to figure out like what made that book as good as it is. And I think it's the accessibility and the relatability of the story, so I definitely like pulled some of that from it. So I study the housing market in my regular job. There's this great book called Fixer Upper by Jenny Schutz. If you want to learn about why housing is so unaffordable, I'd recommend that. There's also this, I've been rereading a lot of my old favorite books, and there's this author named Max Schulman from the 1950s who's like a comedy writer, and I've been rereading his stuff because I think he's just a really great writer. Again, trying to figure out like what is it that I like so much about these books, and what can I learn from it.
No, I appreciate you sharing that. I want to go check those out. And then here's a very fun one. Where do you see the economy in 6 months?
There's an uncomfortable probability that we will be in a recession. There were some jobs numbers that came out just today that make it seem like maybe we're not going to enter into recession just yet. Maybe it's just going to be, a bit of stagnant economic growth. But it's not great. I don't think anybody's really happy, especially people who are just out of college hoping to get a new job. Not a lot of entry-level workers are being hired nowadays. You can blame AI, you can blame the high interest rates. Interest rates are high, which makes it more expensive to borrow, to buy things like a home or a car. So your money is not like going as far because you have to pay more to borrow for these kinds of things. So I think that it's not a catastrophe yet, but it still doesn't feel great, especially knowing that we could have had a much stronger economy right now than what we have right now. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. It seems to be a lot of self-inflicted wounds. And I we're in graduation season, and I think we both probably could have immense empathy for the graduates, because living through 2008 and everything that happened after that. And obviously, I mean, that was also kind of man-made, I guess, in a sense, but it doesn't feel like the economy. It feels like coming out of COVID, like we almost landed the plane perfectly. Like I think Jerome Powell in history for what he was able to do after that. And shout out to the American consumer for keeping it moving. But everything we are feeling right now is completely self-inflicted. So
it makes me sad, because I remember we were originally forecasting 10% growth in home sales, and now home sales are down. So it definitely feels like, man, like we could have been coming out of this. We could have like had this recovery that would have been strong, but now we're just kind of like middling along. And it's the tariffs, like going back and forth on the tariffs, it doesn't help anybody to like have that uncertainty. Uncertainty is really bad for the economy because people like to know if they're going to make an investment in a factory or hiring workers, that the economy is still going to be basically in a good position. But I think a lot of businesses are worried just about like, how do they pivot if things go bad?
I feel like uncertainty is going to be what the time word of the year. I put a big bet on that one. I guess to wrap this up, remind folks why you named this book Hate the Game, because I think that message was really powerful. And I think especially for anybody, but especially for like the youth, right? Can you explain why you named it Hate the Game?
So the full expression is don't hate the player, hate the
Right.
game. And that's really the advice I want to give to young people who feel like the economy is unfair, they feel like it's not set up for them. That's fine. You can be mad at the economic structures, but it doesn't mean that you shouldn't play. Like, don't hate yourself because of it for participating in it, because it is just the game's fault. And you should still try to play, because it's really important for people who are aware of the ways that the economy is unfair to get to a position of power where they can actually start changing some of the rules. It doesn't really help you or help anybody by opting out of playing. That's, if anything, what the winners want. They want less competition. So play hard and use your hate. Just focus on like exploiting the ways that the economy is broken in a way that that gives you an advantage.
Yeah, no, I thought it was a very powerful message, because a lot of folks are like, well, this is so terrible, it's so unfair, I want to check out, but we really can't check out of it, right? I mean, the economy touches everything, and if you don't play it, you're just gonna lose, right?
Yeah. And it goes back to that chess metaphor. Like, just
Right.
because you start at a disadvantage doesn't mean that you can't win. You just need to be aware of where all the pitfalls are and find a way around them.
Yes. No, this has been amazing. Please, everybody, go out now and grab Dr. Darrell Fairweather's new book, Hate the Game: Economic Cheat Codes for Life, Love, and Work. I have it right here, obviously here. So again, it's always close. I will reference this for the rest of my life. But thank you so much for joining us today. This was a really dope conversation.
Thank you for having me. It was great talking to you.
Awesome.